Nowadays there are many discussions about the negative impact of the internet on young teenagers. What security system or programs help to ensure the safe internet for the young people?
Well, first of all, I would assume it's not entirely a technology problem, so it cannot be solved by technology. It's a lot of things involved: education, at home, in school, during studies. It's a lot of organization, figuring out what harmful content is there, which might hit youngsters. And then it's technology, which is well proven by companies, where they would install blocks and filters and things which block things that are considered harmful. The problem is that the younger generation is technology-wise, it's very well educated. So it's very likely that they will find their way around any technical blocks. So I think the best way of dealing with that situation is not necessarily technology, but awareness. I think that's much more important.
And on one hand, there are many attempts to create the safe internet. On the other hand, the internet itself tempts teenagers to use it. Do you see her balance?
I think there will never be a perfect balance because the content of the internet and the very nature of the internet keeps on changing. So that balance has to be renegotiated basically every day. So I do not expect us to become stable in that respect anytime in the future, but it's a carefully negotiated equilibrium between the two sides that has to be maintained. And as the rate of technological change and the rate of informational change is so rapid, we have to expect that this negotiation will have to take place all over again and again, just to make sure that the balance is right for a given status of a society in time. What was acceptable 10 years ago might no longer be acceptable now. What's acceptable now might create a problem in the future. So that has to be rechecked, and it's society as a whole that will decide what is acceptable in terms of internet use and what isn't. And that may not be the same in every country. It may be different from Asia to Europe to the Americas. So there won't be one stable state, there will be one stable state per society. And that's a big change.
And are the most popular social networking websites like Facebook or others safe for teenagers?
They can be made safe for teenagers if you restrict time of access, if you use the filters wisely. The problem is that the parents of those teenagers are not necessarily the best persons to judge that, because their technology use is very different from that of their children. They might not be as well educated in applying those filters. So again, whatever filter logic is available in those social networks should be used once it's fully understood how it works. But people also need to understand where the limitations are. And as a parent, you would rather like to know what your children are doing rather than relying on a filter in a piece of software. So yes, these mechanisms are available, they should be used. There's no excuse for not using them, but they're not perfect. And they're not taking the responsibility away from elder people, from parents, from teachers, to know what the younger generation is doing, to a certain extent. Whatever remains as a risk is the risk of growing up. Everyone has been exposed to some risk while growing up, and this is their risk. We cannot take that away to 100%, but we can make them aware what kind of risk they're taking, and we can make sure that some of those risks can be dealt with accordingly. But there will be a risk that's remaining, and that is a responsibility of society, of parents, of teachers, to make sure that the younger generation understands those risks and deals with them.
And are there any other dangers for the teenagers in the internet?
Yes, I think there's lots of additional dangers, not just the younger generation. There's dangers to everyone using the internet, because we are basing services and reliability on the internet, and it was never designed to be that way. The internet is a best effort service. It might not be available for any reason, and a lot of things will break. A lot of control will no longer be available. If my children cannot send me email about picking them up after school, that might be a problem. If my telephony service is internet-based, my telephony service will also be affected. So my children might not be able to reach me in time. So this is an additional risk out on the internet if they cannot reach out to information that they actually need to make their life and their situation more safe and more secure. there's lots of those additional risks, and there's absolutely no technology-driven way of dealing with them. Again, this is something that has to include process, technology, and people.
What exactly is the Generation Y?
Generation Y refers to a famous book that was written some time ago about something called Generation X. So Y was the character following X in the alphabet. And Generation Y is defined as the people who were born between, say, 1978 and 1994. It's a particular generation that was the first of its kind to grow up as digital natives, as people who grew up with internet, grew up with mobile phones. It's the first generation that didn't have to learn how to deal with these things. They're not like me, like a digital immigrant. They are the digital natives. They were born into the digital country. They grew up with email. They grew up with Facebook. So they're used to it, and that's what makes up Generation Y. After Generation Y, there's even a new generation. It's called the Generation Millennium. And these are the ones which are in their teens and 20s when the millennium switched over. So there's the next generation already starting, and their uptake of technology is again very different from Generation Y.